So, of course, today is one of the greatest feast days of the entire year for the Catholic Church, All Saints' Day. And I think that the readings for today are especially well chosen in the lectionary. In our three readings, I think that we find correspondence to three aspects regarding sanctity and sainthood. Namely, firstly, that John affirms in his vision and revelation that there are a lot of saints. There are saints in heaven worshiping God right now. Secondly, in the letter from John, we realize that and hear that we are called to be saints. We're called to be numbered among those saints in heaven. And then thirdly, in the gospel, Jesus with the Beatitudes tells us how to be saints. So we know that there are saints, that we're called to be saints, and we're told how we can be saints. I think that's beautiful, and we should take some time to sit with this. The scriptures tell us all about sanctity, ultimately, which is nothing more than being made like God. And of course, even though there are ways that we need to choose sainthood in our lives, we're reminded constantly that it's not something we grasp for ourselves. So with this first reading, sainthood is described as those who are wearing white robes around God in heaven. And John is told, "These are the ones who have survived the time of great distress. They have washed their robes and made them white in the blood of the Lamb." So that tells us that sanctity, firstly, isn't easy. That it requires surviving a time of great distress, namely that we have to be thrown into this world and come out the other side still being in union with God. And granted, it's not done on our power, so in a certain sense it is easy. It's not something that we achieve, but also it is a time of great distress, that this world is full of conflict. Sometimes we feel like now more than ever, but ultimately that it's just about being washed in the blood of the Lamb, that Christ has won the victory, and all we have to do is receive that grace. And we do so by immersing ourselves in that sacrifice of Christ on the cross. In other words, how could God the Father turn away someone who literally is bearing on their own robes the blood of his Son in sacrifice, namely saying that Christ, your Son, died for me at this moment. You can't turn someone away who Christ died for. And we're reminded in the second reading that we are called to be children of God, not just people who know of God, not just followers of God, but God wants to adopt us as his own children, co-heirs with that Christ who died for us. And what a wonderful gift that is, obviously. And really, sanctity resides in that. Sanctity resides in loving God and being loved by God. First being loved by God, actually, and then loving in response and in return. And John reminds us that we're all called to be that we enter into that relationship now, and it's not totally fulfilled until we're in heaven. In this third reading, the gospel, Jesus tells us what that sanctity actually looks like in your life. Blessed are those who are poor in spirit. This is the first beatitude and really the most important. I think that it's sufficient just for here and now just to consider this one beatitude as really the root of sanctity in a certain sense. In other words, that we realize that on our own we're nothing. Those who are poor in spirit can see that all good things come from God. They don't rely on themselves, but they turn to God at every opportunity out of humility and love for him. And of course, ultimately, rejoice and be glad, for your reward will be great in heaven. All Saints' Day isn't just a celebration of those saints who are in heaven, but it's a reminder to us that we're called to that, and it should be a day of inspiration and renewal of that zeal to pursue sanctity. So let us today, especially, as well as all other days, pray for the intercession of those who are in heaven, that someday we may come to rejoice with them.